Hello and welcome back to Ride Rescue. In this episode, I will walk you through how to repair a front fender that's a pretty substantial dent, and it's in an area that's pretty difficult to fix. So as a DIY project, this is something that you can do in your garage with most of the typical tools, going from repairing the dent to putting in filler and paint and final finish work. So on this section of the video, I'll be putting on the filler and we'll get this primed, sanded, and painted and put it back on the car. So pretty much what I expected is just opened right up. It was such a tight crease it split open, but it looks like I am going to be able to save it. I can flatten that out and smooth this area, and I'll have to go back and weld that. Perfect. Really good. One of the things you'll see different guys doing is they'll just scuff this up with like 320 or 220 sandpaper, and they'll put the filler right on the paint. I haven't had very good luck with that. I know a lot of them are doing it, a lot of the pros are doing it, but you get a little bit of a tap and it cracks and it starts to peel. So I like to use a fairly heavy grit. I typically use an 80 grit, and I'll scuff up the whole area so that I have a good bite for the filler. Okay, now I've got a good ground sharp edge to bond to. I'll scuff this up as well, so I can put just a thin coat of filler, just some lightweight filler underneath there, so that I can get a nice clean sharp edge. I want to knead it good because it does separate when it sits for a while. I have a couple of dings that I'm going to fill when I'm at it. You can see the other two small dings. I scuffed that up pretty heavy before I put in filler. Should have a really good bond. The filler that I used is a lightweight filler, and it's a special formula for easier, quicker sanding. Typically I'll use a hard-backed sanding block, but with the contours that are on this area, I'm going to use more of a flexible backing. I'm going to use some 80 grit sandpaper. This sandpaper is a sticky back. You want to keep going in all directions. you just keep sanding in one area, you're going to end up with a flat spot. So as long as you keep moving it around, then you'll be able to keep the contour. As it starts to get thin, you start to be able to see areas where it's a transparent edge. You want to try to keep moving around those and find where those high spots are. If we do have a drastic high spot, then we can tap those down. But if we still end up with low spots and high spots, then we'll have to put on another coat. So far so good. It's filling perfectly smooth. I'm not getting any high spots. I've got some low spots here, but I still have some sanding to go. I don't think we'll be needing another coat. I want to work this edge down. I want to keep it as flat as possible. I like to use a straight edge to verify. I've got a little bit of a high spot here. I bent this piece just slightly to match the opposite side of the car so that I could use it as a guide. And that is dead on. Once you get the main area where you want it, you just take a little piece and finish off the edges. And these edges are sharp when they've been sanded this way, and you feel there's a little bit of a rolled edge there. So try to mimic that edge. Do the same thing. I want to round this edge. Right now it's super sharp. We don't want to round it too much, but we don't want to leave it too sharp either. Okay, that looks good. It's ready for primer. Okay, I've got that feathered out really good. I'm comfortable with that one as well. So now I need to knock the gloss off of this fender. I want to prime these areas. I'll use a heavy primer surfacer. I've seen guys mask off and then prime, and then they have to go back and sand off that edge. I prefer sanding all this area. I am going to re-clear coat the whole fender, but I'm only going to actually add color to just this area. This particular color is very difficult to match in technique and in style and how it's applied. So if I painted this whole fender with this green base coat, there's a chance that where it meets up to the hood and the door, it's not going to be an exact match. The light may catch the colors just a little bit different, just enough that it might stand out. I just do not want that. I don't want to end up having the customer say, it doesn't match the door, it doesn't match the hood, and then I've got to go blend in the door and the hood. So if I can stop short of these areas with the base coat and just kind of feather it in, then I can do the whole fender with clear and it'll all match, if all goes as planned. Okay, I don't want to take this clear down too much. I don't want to scuff it up too much, because I want to be able to not, as I was saying earlier, not recoat all of the color. So if I scuff it up, then I'll be able to get a good bond for my primer, and then I can sand it again and get all the primer smooth and all of the clear coat area smooth, and then I'll be able to just kind of mist in my color in those spots where the primer will be, and then I can clear coat all the way to the edges. It's a fresh piece of sandpaper, so you have to be careful on rounded edges like these. You can sand through it really quick. I just want to take the shine off and scuff it, but I don't want to go through that clear, because then I'll have to cover this whole fender with base coat color, and I'm trying to avoid that. If you start seeing color in your sanding paper moisture, that means you've gone through the clear and you're picking up the color underneath. Typically when you're sanding with 1000 grit, 1200 grit sandpaper, your water will be coming out kind of a creamy white look, bubbly look. So you get color, which I'm getting a little bit of green color in here, but it's where I've already gone through clear. Now, if you're doing it with your hands like I am, especially with your fingertips, you've got to be careful not to keep going in the same direction. You want to crisscross. Try to use the palm of your hand. You'll have less likelihood of rubbing in grooves. If you were doing this with 400 grit sandpaper or even 600 grit sandpaper, I would always use a block, because you can so quickly start to add grooves. But with 1000 grit sandpaper, as long as you keep crisscrossing and moving around, it's not too likely that you'll leave finger marks. All I'm trying to do is just knock off the gloss. 1000 grit and 1200 grit sandpaper, it's going to take a lot longer to really cut that shine off. You're going to show a lot of orange peel. It's very revealing when it comes to all the slightest little flaws in that clear coat. If I was to be sanding this with 400 grit or 600 grit, I would take that finish off really fast. And that's part of the reason why I'm not too concerned about using my fingertips, because the 1200 is so slow, it's so gradual, it takes off such a minimal surface. I'm not that concerned. And this is ready. So I'll mix up some primer, and I'll just prime these spots, and then I can sand the primer. It's ready for base coat. Masking wise, it was just a matter of tucking the headlight, so that was easy. I like to tape across this way and then flip up over, and then it gives you a soft edge, especially when I'm priming. Do the same thing when I do the base coat, and then the clear coat I'll do a hard edge along the edges of the fender. But putting a soft edge like this makes it a lot easier to sand. Before I start painting, we'll wipe it down with some surface wash to get any wax or greases that might be on it, especially from fingerprints. I didn't show this in the video. This area got scuffed when it was dented, so I just scuffed it up, and then I'll put a good heavy coat of primer on it, and I can fill out and feather out those edges. You want to tack rag off any dust. Not that critical with the primer, but it definitely is in the other coats. I'm going to use my little cheap Harbor Freight detail gun. This works great for little areas. You can adjust the fan on the bigger guns, but this one, even though it has adjustments, it's not that good. So it doesn't flow real heavy, so I had to really thin the primer. But for a spot filler area like this, it's not too bad. I didn't thin it beyond what the manufacturer's recommendation is. It's a 2-part primer. It's a 2K. It's urethane, and I'm going to be using a urethane base coat and a urethane top coat. So the same hardener is used in all stages, and that just makes everything chemically bond to the fender from the primer all the way up to the top coat. You may have noticed me really putting it in heavy in this area. I've got a couple little pinholes that showed up and another fairly large pinhole here. I'm surprised it didn't show up when I was sanding. I forgot to get some spot glazing putty while I was at the store, so I'll just use this. It's basically the same product, it's just thinner. The nice thing about the primer, it sets up pretty quick. It doesn't sag unless you really put it on heavy. So I can build these areas up until I start to almost see a run, and they flow into those pinholes. This one here is pretty large. I'm probably going to have to skin that with a little bit of my lightweight filler and then hit it again with some primer. But let it set up a little bit more and then just really hit that with more primer. I feathered it out so that it's not a hard edge, it's not obviously thick. And then when I go back and sand it, I'll be able to feather all the edge out and you won't be able to see where those high build areas are. Other than this one little hole right there, it looks really good. Just dab in a little bit of primer in that low spot. Hopefully that takes care of it. Before I clean this up, I'm just going to skiff it with a little black primer. You can use a guide coat. There's sprayable guide coats. There's a powder guide coat. I just use a dark primer. But I think it's personal preference, really. You sand it off. You want to keep going until it's gone, and this does dry fairly quickly. Well, it's starting to dry. You can peel back this masking tape, and you can see how it does leave a softer edge, where if I would have masked this direction, it would leave that tough tape edge. But by putting it on that way, rolling it back, and putting the paper on top of it, it leaves a softer edge. So I'll do the same thing when I put on the base coat, but when I actually put on the clear coat, then I'll go all around the edges. So I let this primer cure for almost 2 hours. So now I'm going to sand it with 600 grit. Hopefully it sands fairly easily. If not, then I'll let it drop down to a 400 grit. You can see the guide coat. Got some scratches in this area that still haven't finished, and I've got some speckling from the orange peel, but I don't see anything deep. It shouldn't be able to be sanded out. I'm going to step down to a 400 grit for this area. And then I'll go back to the 600 grit for the final sanding. I'm getting down to where those pinholes were. Little pin bubbles. And it looks like we're going to cover right up. With that guide coat, you can see the low spot I had right here. I had a little bit of a high spot right there. There was a pretty deep hole right there that I dabbed the primer into. That appears to have worked. And now I'll go back to the 600 grit and just clean this all up. Still need to clean up the underside of that fender. I'll do that when I take the fender off. Okay, I'll pull the fender back off, finish sanding the top of this bumper and the bottom side of the fender, and it's ready for paint. Now the fender has the base coat, I'm going to install it and then mask it all off and get ready for the clear coat. I want to reseal this edge. I have some 3M weather strip adhesive. I'll just put a coating on that and it'll rebond that foam. When it comes to the final top coat, three most important things. Masking everything off so you don't get overspray on things you don't want overspray on. Those are obvious. Making sure everything's wiped down. There's some little dust specks in my base coat. I was hoping to go from base coat directly to clear coat, but my timing didn't quite come out. We had a bad storm come in, the wind was really heavy, it was kicking up dust in the garage, the humidity dropped, the temperature dropped, so I decided to wait. The window of opportunity is 24 hours to get clear on top of this base. So I'm still within that. I'm about 18 hours so far. So I've picked up some dust, and I'm noticing in the finish, in the base coat, I have some specks that stuck to the dust. So by just taking a Scotch-Brite pad and just gently going over it, you can knock down any dust that is adhered, as well as a little overspray that's adhered, especially along these edges. I didn't paint the base coat all the way to the edges because I want to be able to have it blend with the original color in this area. If I have it blend right on the hard line, it's probably going to be noticeable. But by blending just inside of that line, then the eye and the way the light goes across it should hide that blend. So by just taking a Scotch-Brite, you just kind of go over and knock it down without getting too aggressive with it, because then you'll leave scratches that will actually show up in your clear coat. And that brings us to the third topic, which is lighting. When it comes to your top coat, it's really important to have good adequate lighting, because if you've got some shadows in areas and it looks like your lighting is good, it looks like you've got a good coat, you might end up having a little bit of a dry spot. Or you put it on too heavy because it doesn't look like it's that wet, and then you've got a sag or a run. So those are the three things. I have a body line right here that I want to blend to, so I'm going to roll the tape back on itself so it'll have a softer edge. So by back taping and kind of back rolling the masking tape around all the edges, then I just pulled plastic over the whole car. You've probably seen this online, but once you pull the plastic over it, just tap it on. Sorry, I caught video of it, but my battery went dead and didn't realize it. Then once I've got the tape area all stuck, then just go over it real lightly with a razor blade and just cut and peel away the plastic for the area that you want painted. I like to cover paper around areas that can ripple the plastic while I'm spraying, because it can have a tendency to maybe flick off a little piece of clear or a base coat or something from your plastic. It comes off pretty easy when it starts to whip in the breeze from the spray gun. In fact, if you watch many of Goon Squad's videos, that actually happened to them once. They would just cover it with plastic and paint, and they had a flick come off and get on the hood of one of their cars, and they had to repaint the hood. It's happened to me before too. So now I always make sure the upper areas where gravity can flip something at you, the lower areas I will take and put paper around as much of it as I can to make sense. And then I don't have to worry about anything kicking off of the plastic. Plastic is kind of a static cling, and once you start getting it wet and you break that static, things start to move. the finished product. So I got all the masking off and put it back on the ground. In my garage, with the lights on, I'm not seeing any variations in the orange peel. Matches the factory, the OEM finish, if you will. I'm not seeing any color shifts, which is great. The blending to the hood, it's all smooth into the dent area. There was a ding on the top of this fender lip that is now gone, and there was a ding about in this area that is now gone. For a high mileage car that's got a lot of dings and scratches, I'm very pleased with how this fender turned out. The whole car does need a complete paint job, but for just getting a big dent out from next to a headlight, that's a huge improvement. So thank you for watching this episode of Ride Rescue. Stay tuned for more videos. Please hit the like and subscribe buttons. Any support is much appreciated.